Chapter 51, Re-interrogation of Shou Gou begins. The murderer has nowhere to escape. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This sentence. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. That it was actually extremely normal for Su Chongqing to react so violently, because, the last sentence Huang Yan said contained too much information. Being able to tell directly that Huang Yan is lame, it undoubtedly shows. The criminal behind the scenes definitely knows the general situation of Huang Yan, otherwise he would not be able to tell the lameness so accurately. And, it's not as good as the sentence pigs in the mental hospital, which seems to point the clue in one direction, that is, Zhang Wan and Huang Yan are not the only victims of the game. There may be patients in a mental hospital who are being controlled by this blue whale game. Su Ming was sitting next to him. He immediately opened his laptop, logged into Huang Yan's mailbox again, and opened the email with the latest date. After a few glances, turning the computer screen in front of Su Chongqing, he gave some instructions. That's right, Brother Sheng. This email does exist. It seems that the murderer behind the scenes learned that Huang Yan has not completed the game mission for several days in a row. Obviously, some people are desperate. I don't know who is afraid that they will fail, or that this matter will be exposed. That I also looked at the email. Su Chongqing nodded with satisfaction and analyzed with certainty. Judging from the current progress, it is almost 100% certain that people around us may have committed crimes. At the same time, mental hospitals that ordinary people don't pay attention to are likely to have similar cases. The clues are being gathered step by step, and it seems that the truth is about to be revealed. Then he looked at Huang Yan seriously and signaled. Huang Yan, are there any other contents and details? As long as you think there is a problem and something worthy of attention, you can speak out. This sentence, Huang Yan frowned hard and thought about the memories for a few seconds before shaking her head and saying sadly. There is none left. Because after being scolded by him yesterday, I went to the rooftop of the abandoned teaching building in the evening to witness the freedom in Xiaowen's heart. Now that I think about it, I should have noticed the problem earlier. If he really helped people gain freedom, why would he send an email to scold me? Shouldn't it be that it doesn't matter whether I complete the game or not? But now all the regrets and awakenings, as well as unwillingness. It's already too late. Looking at Huang Yan, who was suddenly depressed, Su Ming closed the laptop and sighed to comfort him. Don't blame yourself too much. It is very difficult for you to not fully comply with the criminal suspect's requirements when your mind and spirit are corrupted by drugs. After all, it was Zhang Wan who encountered a change in her life, which gave the suspect an opportunity to take advantage of. Speaking of which, Su Ming looked at Su Chongqing next to him. When he saw him nodding, he immediately stood up and continued. Okay, Huang Yan. This interrogation ends here first. Someone will pick you up in your room later, take you to meet your parents, and give you a certain amount of time to have lunch. But since you are an important person in the case, you cannot leave the police station in the short term. The words fell. Su Ming carried the documents and laptop and followed Su Chongqing out of the interrogation room. Then he came to the dedicated crime-solving conference room alone. Su Chongqing took out his mobile phone in the corridor and immediately dialed the number of the person in charge of the detention center. There is no doubt about it. This is to ask the detention center to bring Shou Gou to the Huaihai Criminal Investigation Brigade as soon as possible to dig deeper into this other line. Although, this kind of drug dealers all use a one-line method of contact, but Skinny Dog definitely has a lot of things left unsaid. At least, in the previous interrogation of Shou Gou, there was no mention of helping the boss to deliver the drugs to Zhang Wan and Huang Yan. When Su Chongqing communicated with the detention center, Su Ming looked at his inbox again and found that no new Blue Whale game emails had been sent today, and it was already past 12 noon. This undoubtedly illustrates, the murderer lurking behind the scenes has now learned about Zhang Wan's death, and even knows that Huang Yan is controlled by the police. That's why I didn't send a new Blue Whale game and chose to hide myself. Put the notebook aside for now. Su Ming leaned back on the chair and closed his eyes slightly, pinching his eyebrows with his right hand, sorting through the many clues Huang Yan just said in his mind. First point first, at present, we can confirm that the murderer is around. and we also know the general situation of Zhang Wan and Huang Yan, and even the timeliness is extremely impressive. At least, there are no new blue whale games sent today. Point 2, the murderer was Shou Gou's boss, and he was even the biggest drug dealer in the entire Magic City. He was able to obtain a large amount of extremely pure drugs from an unknown channel. Otherwise, why don't you even dilute it, just take the drug with such high purity, add it and make it into candy, and use it to control the blue whale game. Point 3, judging from the murderer's consciousness controlling the crime method, although it is not particularly outstanding, it is obviously not the first time I have encountered it. Plus, the email also responded to the message from the mental hospital, so could the murderer be related to the staff of the mental hospital? But it's not certain yet. Is this special reply in the email the murderer's subconscious angry words, or is it a deliberately wrong answer? Because the email was answered that night, Zhang Wan chose to run for freedom and fell from a high building. Does the murderer lurking behind the scenes start planning in advance to get rid of his own suspicion? This cannot be ruled out at this time, but there is a high probability. It is probably a deliberate cover-up, because the murderer will definitely check every email several times out of caution. So why do you have to mention Huang Yan's lameness? Tens of minutes later, Su Ming slowly opened his eyes and couldn't help but sigh secretly. The current clues are few and far between. Although some suspects can be identified, it is still far from the truth. Must just dig as deep as possible into the line of thin dogs. Just then, Su Changsheng, who had just arranged matters in the corridor, opened the door and knocked on the wooden door of the conference room, reminding Su Ming to signal. Let's go, Xiao Ming. Shou Gou has brought the team as quickly as possible. Currently in the interrogation room. Let's go to the interrogation together and see if we can dig out any clues, otherwise it won't be so easy to find the murderer. Su Ming was worried that there were not enough clues. He immediately stood up and quickly came to the interrogation room with the necessary things. When Su Ming and Su Changsheng first entered the interrogation room, sitting on the interrogation chair, with his hands cuffed, the thin dog with slender body and bulging cheekbones quickly tugged on the handcuffs, struggled and shouted. Officer, 2 officers. What's going on? Why did you pull me here again? I told you everything a few days ago. I have really confessed everything and helped you dig out several offline people. Hear these words. Su Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, stared at the thin dog coldly and said expressionlessly. Huh? Have you explained everything? Then you'd better not give up those 60 drug candies for little girls. I've already been told everything. Chapter 52. Skinny Dog is more stubborn than ever, and the fear brought to him by the unknown online. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 60 pieces of candy drugs. This sentence made Shou Gou's pupils shrink slightly, but he immediately hid them and pretended to be surprised and puzzled. Officer. You are really wrong. You are really wrong. Although I usually sell some drugs for a living, I sell heroin. I don't know what candy drugs are. Even if I know what it is. I can't sell drugs to little girls. I really don't dare to. Besides, who would eat drugs directly? Isn't that a waste? Use tin foil to heat and suck it up. Isn't it more powerful than oral administration? And it can save a lot of money. Shou Gou's explanation seemed particularly forced, and he even said a lot of irrelevant things. He tried to use this to forcibly whitewash himself and get rid of this matter, but such a poor explanation. Even the newly recruited criminal police could see the problem, so how could he hide it from Su Ming and Su Changsheng? At this moment, Su Ming was unwilling to waste time, and looked at Shou Gou with a cold expression. He turned the laptop screen to Shou Gou, pointed at the portrait of Huang Yan on it, and said in a serious and cold voice. Don't you know? Then let me help you recall it. It was about 15 days ago, that is, the period before you were arrested. Did this junior high school girl who walked with a limp on the screen take 30 drugs disguised as candy from you under someone's arrangement? And at that time, it should be that there happened to be another drug dog who had no money to buy xiao bai, and knelt down to beg you to give him a bite, but you kicked him directly against the wall. As for The other 30 candy drugs, you also gave them to another junior high school girl in the first half of the month according to your online requirements. At this point, Su Changxing took over the conversation, tapping the table with his fingers, and said coldly. Skinny dog, how is it? Is it clear enough for you to remember? Or do you really want to continue to play dumb? Skinny dog sitting on the interrogation chair, slight sweat has appeared on his forehead, his face is a little pale, and he swallowed hard, shook his head and stuttered. No. No, officer. I really don't understand what you just said. What lame, what junior high school girl, what received an order, except that drug addicts often ask me to buy goods on credit, I really don't know anything else. Oh, right, I know. Officer, do you feel that the pressure of drug control is a bit high recently? Haven't you completed the target required by the superiors? I still have a list of several drug addicts. Although they don't ask me to buy goods anymore, I know they definitely haven't. Before Skinny Dog finished speaking. Bang! Su Changxing slammed the table hard, and stood up and said angrily. Skinny Dog. Do you still think we are kidding you? I'll tell you straight. The junior high school girl who first asked you for candy and drugs is now dead and lying in the funeral home in Huaihai City. What do you think? Is this something that can be solved by you giving out a few drug dogs? And what I didn't expect is, you sold enough drugs to eat peanuts, but when you were arrested and interrogated, you dared not confess anything. Although you gave out a lot of people, you really didn't say a word about the head of the online line. Did that person threaten you? That there is no doubt, Su Changxing has already seen some problems, because the previous interrogation of Skinny Dog was not as difficult and hard as it is now, at least, last time, when he learned that the weight of his drug trafficking had reached the weight of a peanut, Skinny Dog cooperated unprecedentedly. Before the interrogator used any means or threats, he had confessed everything, and even gave out many senior drug addicts who bought drugs from him, just to get a slight reduction in sentence, at least give him a chance not to eat peanuts, but this time, he was so stubborn, it is very likely that he was threatened. Hearing the question of whether he was threatened, the Skinny Dog obviously lowered his head and remained silent for 2 seconds, and then showed a smile of sudden enlightenment, looking at Su Ming and Su Changxing, who were quite flattering and clasping their hands together. 2 officers, I'm sorry, don't be angry. I seem to remember it. 15 days ago, there was indeed a little girl who looked like the one on the screen who came to me to buy drugs. At that time, I was a little curious. How could she take drugs at such a young age? But if you have money, you are a fool not to make it. I just sold her 30 yuan of drug candies I made myself. I sold those drug candies to the officer. If you insist on talking about other people and command orders, I really don't know. Hearing this, Su Changxing had already sat back in his chair, staring at the fawning Skinny Dog opposite him. Heh, Skinny Dog, you really broadened my horizons. I didn't expect a person as afraid of death as you would take the initiative to take on such a case one day. But do you think you can handle it? Do you really think that we policemen eat for free? Can't you see that you dare not expose your online presence and want to hide something? Speaking of this, Su Changxing seemed to be completely impatient, waved his hand and looked at Su Ming beside him. No need for any eye contact at all. Su Ming saw Su Changxing's thoughts, walked to the end to turn off the camera, and spoke meaningfully. Brother Sheng, stop talking nonsense to this kind of person. Use those methods that are not allowed to be used directly. Let's see whether he is stubborn or the methods that have been passed down by our criminal investigation are stubborn. Anyway, I have turned off the camera. When the time comes, I will replace the surveillance. No one can find out about this. Besides, we are not forcing him to confess and plead guilty, but to get clues and intelligence about this case. In this way, even if he suddenly regrets in court, it will be useless. After all, what he confessed in the previous interrogation is enough to convict him. Speaking of this, Su Ming specifically glanced at the frightened skinny monkey, his eyes flickering and pretending to be crazy. Brother Sheng, I have an idea. Why don't I go find Shen Lin, a forensic doctor, and get some high-purity white samples from her. When the time comes, open it and hang it in front of the skinny dog's nose. Do you think a drug addict who hasn't smoked for so many days can resist the drug addiction? I remember it's written in the textbook. The drug addiction that breaks out after long-term heroin withdrawal is more intense than any other drug. It feels like ants are crawling all over the body is cold and shivering, the internal organs are extremely hot, the head is dizzy, and the nose and tears are running. Stop again, looking at the skinny dog with a look of deep fear in his eyes. Su Ming squinted his eyes and said deliberately. By the way, skinny dog. You haven't smoked cocaine for so many days, have you gotten over your addiction? I heard that old drug addicts like you have committed suicide by hitting the wall after falling into drug addiction. But I think, since you dare to take the case of murder for others, then you can take the heroin addiction later. That should be no problem, right? Chapter 53. The interrogation made a major breakthrough and finally uncovered the roots of the crimin. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The method Su Ming mentioned, it is an interrogation method strictly prohibited by law, that is, using various criminal laws, coercion or special means to force the suspect to confess and surrender. It is nicknamed Great Memory Recovery Technique by many netizens. It is said that even if you don't have this memory, you can recover this memory. Of course, although it is strictly prohibited, there are still many police stations at the grassroots level that will use this unconventional method to close the case as soon as possible. But basically, the evidence is conclusive, but the suspect is still stubborn. Just like now, it can be clearly seen that Shou Gou definitely knows a lot of online clues, but he is holding on and not saying a word. In addition, the evidence obtained previously is enough for the court to sentence. At this time, a great recovery technique is used, in order to obtain important key clues. It is also a method that many police forces will take. After all, there is really no time to waste with these people. However, Su Ming and Su Chongqing did not have such an intention. They believed that they only needed verbal cooperation to break Shou Gou's psychological defense, because, for a drug addict, any physical pain is not as bad as a complete drug addiction attack. At this moment, Su Ming deliberately mentioned heroin and drug addiction. The skinny dog who was sitting on the interrogation chair and holding on suddenly remembered the situation when his drug addiction broke out in the detention center a few days ago. That was really worse than death. The skin all over his body was numb as if pricked by needles, tears and snot could not stop flowing down, and his limbs were sore that he couldn't muster any strength at all. The spirit and consciousness seemed to be separated from the body, and there seemed to be hundreds of little people jumping in his head every moment. Even now, just thinking about it slightly, the skinny dog trembled all over, and there was an unspeakable fear. Then he looked at Su Ming with horror. Then, before he could say anything, in his sight, Su Ming nodded to Su Chongqing, and stood up without hesitation, as if he was going to go to the technical department to get high-purity heroin. At this moment, the fear brought by the drug addiction he had been fighting for several days swallowed Shou Gou's whole body in an instant, but his throat seemed to be blocked and he couldn't speak at all, just as Su Ming took a few more steps and passed by Shou Gou's interrogation chair. Bang bang bang, the sound of the head hitting the metal kept ringing. Shou Gou hit the interrogation chair with his head, as if to temporarily get rid of the fear in his heart, and cried desperately. Officer! Officer! I really can't do it, I can't say it. Those people will kill me. No, they will kill my family, they will kill all my family members. Please, don't ask anymore. I did everything, and I don't know who is online. These words. Su Ming stopped immediately, but he didn't pay attention to Shou Gou's continuous hitting of the interrogation chair and begging, because in the interrogation room, basically, 80% of criminal suspects will hit their heads hard on the table of the interrogation chair to express regret or beg for sympathy. Skinny dog is not an exception, you can say that. As long as you go to the interrogation room of any criminal investigation detachment, the table of the interrogation chair cannot be flat, and there will inevitably be dents left by many suspects hitting their heads. Of course, interrogation chairs are specially made police equipment. Before Skinny Dog hits himself to death, his neck may be sprained and unable to move. So Skinny Dog's begging at this moment seems worthless. At the same time, Su Ming has keenly grasped the problem, frowned slightly and asked coldly. They. Why are there them? Don't you have only one online? Although it seems to be fiercely hitting his head, but in fact, Skinny Dog's inner defense line has been broken. The pain brought by heroin addiction is better than the fear of online. After several hits, his head weakly leaned against the table of the interrogation chair, as if he was completely desperate and hoarse. They are not my superiors. Or rather, they are all the people in the organization where my superiors are, and they control at least 50% of the drug sales network in the entire Dragon Country. Basically, only they dare to sell high-purity drugs in large quantities. As soon as these words came out, Su Changxing sat up straight in an instant. His expression was more solemn than ever before, but he did not choose to ask anything for the time being. This is, really unearthed something incredible. 50% of the drug sales network in Dragon Country. Su Ming was also somewhat indescribably serious, and even suspected, is Shou Gou making up fake news again, trying to cover up his superiors with this, and carefully observed Shou Gou's demeanor and movements for a few times. After confirming that there was no possibility of lying, Su Ming returned to his seat, tapping his fingers on the table and said very seriously. Skinny Dog, raise your head. I need you to tell me everything you know. How did you get the information about this organization? Based on the common methods used by drug dealers, the downline should not know the details of the upline, right? Not to mention knowing about this important organization. Don't hide anything, so that we can do our work better. This is not only for us, but also for protecting. Do your family understand? At this moment. At Su Ming's request, the Skinny Dog slowly raised his head, leaned against the wall weakly, tilted his head and told the story with eyes full of despair. Yes. How can I, a small drug dog who sells some bulk drugs in the Magic City, know such a large drug dealer organization? These things. All of them were told to me by Brother Tai San. He said that if you want to expand your drug business, you must join this organization. Even if you can't become a member of the organization, you have to follow them to do things. Speaking of this, as if he was afraid that Su Ming didn't know about Tai San, Su Changxing explained it specially. Tai San. He is the biggest drug dealer caught in recent years in Gusu City next door. 20 kilograms of heroin and several kilograms of other drugs were seized from his residence. With such a large amount of money, he went through the fast track directly. He was given peanuts in just a few months. At that time, it seemed that Tai San did not choose to appeal, otherwise he could have dragged on for a few more days. Then, Shou Gou showed a sad and bitter smile, and continued with his eyes blank. Brother Tai San, you deserve to die. 20 kilograms of Shao Bai are hidden at home. Who dares to do such a thing? But on the third day after Brother Tai San was shot, when the people were just buried, his whole family died in a car accident on the highway. All of them died, even his 5-year-old daughter didn't survive. Speaking of this, Shou Gou suddenly became excited and kept pulling the interrogation chair and crying. I'm scared. Officer, I'm really scared. I also have a 3-year-old daughter. Chapter 54. The most desperate thing is not being arrested by the police, but being targeted by those. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The cry of a thin dog about to collapse. Su Ming and Su Changxing frowned in unison. Case in Suzhou City. Most of the criminal investigation police in Shanghai will not pay too much attention to it, because the city is overwhelmed with cases, and retrieving case files from across cities requires a rather cumbersome application. But Tai San, the biggest drug dealer in Suzhou City, had just received peanuts not long ago. As a result, the family's child died in an accident in a car accident. And Tai San didn't even have the will to appeal to get a few more days to live. It seemed that his plea was extremely straightforward. It's as if he is eager to prove it to someone. Even if he was caught, he said nothing and gave no clues about how to go online. Look at this. It seems that the hidden truth in the case is not that simple. It is estimated that the Suzhou police also dug for clues for a long time, but they were still unable to obtain the key clues, and in the end they had to close the case accidentally. Of course it's possible. It was really a pure accident, not the conspiracy and murder as imagined, but whatever the case may be, the things and clues revealed by Shou Gou are enough to make people feel shocked and unbelievable. Because there is something hidden deep in the Dragon Kingdom, a huge criminal organization that controls half of the drug business. Looking at the thin dog facing collapse, Su Ming tapped his fingers on the table and frowned seriously. Skinny dog. To be honest, even if you show such pain and despair, I don't have any sympathy in my heart. After all, no one has ever forced you to take drugs, made you need to traffic drugs, made you locked up in a detention center, and had no choice but to leave your daughter. Even now I still have to worry. My daughter is being targeted by that brutal organization and may encounter some kind of man-made accident at any time. You chose this outcome yourself, didn't you? These words, Ling Shou Gou stopped struggling, looked at Su Ming desperately, and opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something. As a result, he could only lower his head silently and could not speak at all. Su Ming was not surprised by this attitude that seemed to be completely desperate, and he continued expressionlessly. But thin dog, you are actually lucky. Because our police happened to pry this clue out of your mouth through another case, so we can take corresponding preventive measures as early as possible. Whether it's in the short term, send police officers to protect your daughter and wait for it to happen, or just follow the clues and find the murderer to avoid future troubles. It's much safer and more secure than if you didn't say anything and hid it from us. Or. Speaking of which, Su Ming paused for 2 seconds, squinted his eyes slightly with a hint of coldness, and shook his head. Do you think you can save your daughter by keeping this matter in your stomach and not saying a word? Skinny dog, let me ask you. Do you think Tai San said anything when he was arrested? Did he dare to say this? Why did he just give up without even appealing? I think he should be like you, thinking that he can protect his family and children without saying anything. But what's the result? At this moment, the thin dog suddenly opened his eyes, and seemed to understand something immediately, and recalled more in his mind, pictures of getting along with triathlon. He knows, the bones of my big brother are countless times stronger than his. He has been arrested so many times and he has not even been able to explain to anyone on the line. Since Tai San didn't say anything, then his family. So, even if you don't say anything, you still can't save your family and children? Looking at the skinny dog in shock and fear, Su Changxing shook his head, patted the table impatiently, and signaled loudly. Okay, thin dog, stop whining. Hurry up and explain everything about this organization clearly from beginning to end, so that we can decide how to protect your daughter. If you have to believe in the so-called promise of that organization, then I think triathlon is a clear example. But, can you give me a cigarette? Skinny Go raised his head as if he had finally made up his mind and looked at Su Ming and Su Changxing. 2 officers, can you give me one? Before the thin dog could finish speaking, Su Changxing directly opened the drawer under the table, took out a pack of cigarettes and a box of matches, and threw them to the thin dog. Skinny dog, you really have a lot on your plate. Stop dilly-dallying for me and continuing to waste time like this. Many criminal suspects will ask for a cigarette when preparing to confess in the interrogation room. In the past, the police would not choose to refuse at such times, so naturally the drawers in the interrogation room were equipped with these things. A skinny dog with his hands cuffed, with great reluctance, he took out the cigarette and match, stood up halfway, stretched his head forward to light the cigarette he was holding, and took a strong puff. I remember it very clearly. It was 3 years ago when my wife accidentally fell and gave birth prematurely. At that time, I had been addicted to drugs for several years. I spent all the money I had on buying a drug addict and had no money to pay for medical expenses. Every day after the hospital bill comes out, the doctor will urge me to pay the debt, but where do I have the money? But I can't just watch the child die. So I started calling to borrow money. Oh, poisonous dogs and gambling dogs are 2 kinds of creatures. No one has time to hang up when making a call, let alone asking for a loan. I found so many people that I'm almost desperate. Brother Tai San agreed. Without saying a word, he paid me 100,000 yuan and asked me to keep the child first. To be honest, I really couldn't believe it at that time. Brother Tai San, whose family was not in a good situation, gave me so much money without even saying a word. The child is finally fine, and he is now 3 years old. When the child's condition stabilized, I immediately went to see Brother Tai San. On the one hand, I wanted to thank him, and on the other hand, I asked him where he got so much money. Because in my impression, Brother Tai San's family is not very rich, so why can he suddenly come up with 100,000 yuan at once? When I came to Gusu City, which is not far from the devil, Brother Tai San took me to find a restaurant to show my friendship as a landlord. At that time, I asked Brother Tai San how he got the money and if he could take it with me. I remember. At that time, Brother Tai San shook his head and said that this way can't lead me, and it can't harm me. When I heard this, I became angry, and I couldn't understand why I yelled. I asked him how he hurt me by making money. Brother Tai San still didn't say anything, so I became even more angry. He stood up as if he was drunk and shouted in the box as if he wanted the whole restaurant to know. That's when I shouted. Isn't it just drug trafficking? What harmed me makes it look like anyone has never walked this road before. As soon as I finished speaking, Brother Tai San slapped me hard and drank a sip of liquor, telling me to forget everything he said next tomorrow. He said. Speaking of which. The thin dog took another heavy puff of cigarette, and the thick smoke enveloped his face. A very terrorist organization came to him and asked him to be a downline to help sell drugs. Not just a novice, he sells basically all kinds of drugs and the purity is very high. When the time comes, there will be an upline in Gusu City. Just contact Brother Tai San and do what the upline requires. Brother Tai San was also selling drugs at that time, and he was quite famous in Suzhou, so he was definitely not qualified to be someone else's little brother. Immediately tell him that he can be the source of all drugs in Gusu and let him join this organization. In the end, I was rejected by that person, saying that there was no need for trash or drug addicts in this organization. Brother Tai San, who is making money from drug addicts but calls drug addicts trash. He has a bad temper. He refused without hesitation and even blocked his phone number. The results came the day after the rejection. Brother Tai San, who had just returned home from smoking in the middle of the night, was knocked unconscious by someone tapping him on the shoulder. And when he wakes up, the person has been tied up in an abandoned factory. A man wearing a mask whose face cannot be seen clearly holds a dark gun pointed at his forehead. The scariest thing is, after Brother Tai San took a look around, he was horrified to realize that his wife, his children and his mother were all tied up next to him. Chapter 55 The sound of eye exercises during the call, locking down the suspect. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hear this, Su Ming became more solemn, and his assessment of the danger of this organization increased even more, because, for a drug trafficking organization, it is simply incredible to be able to require that all core organization members are not addicted to drugs, but it can be further confirmed, this drug trafficking organization is strict, cautious, and has absolute control over its core members, plus. A whole family can be kidnapped in less than a day, and they are also equipped with strictly prohibited firearms. The level of terror of this organization has skyrocketed, but Skinny Dog's story is not over yet. He took another strong puff of the cigarette. He was in the midst of deep memories and didn't even let the puff of smoke pass through his lungs before he continued. Seeing that his family members were also tied up, Brother Tai San went crazy at the time and kept struggling and cursing. Come to him shouting that something is wrong. How can you bring his family with you? Brother Tai San originally thought that such an inspiring person would let go of his family and children. The result was unexpected. The man didn't answer Brother Tai San. He simply squatted down and took out a small syringe from his pocket and sleeve. Insert it directly into Brother Tai San's mother's arm, and then gently inject the liquid inside. 3 minutes. In less than 3 minutes, Brother Tai San saw his mother stop breathing with his own eyes. Crazy, Brother Tai San is completely crazy. He kept struggling and cursing, but that person only left one sentence, leaving Brother Tai San with no choice but to work under him. I remember it very clearly. Brother Taisan told me with tears at that time. That sentence is: 10 kilograms of heroin will be hidden in a coffin and delivered to his home tomorrow. If he doesn't help sell it, there will be not just one coffin in the house the day after tomorrow, but 3 coffins. Oh, that's really awesome. He actually killed Brother Taisan's mother and asked him to help sell drugs. What kind of confidence does this have? Brother Taisan, if he couldn't bear it anymore, why would he tell me about this? After all, we both knew very well that in this kind of organization you have to forget about it. If you are caught, you can't reveal any information. Otherwise you will see your family die in front of you in prison. Speaking of which, Skinny Go looked at Su Ming and Su Chongqing through the smoke, and said in a hoarse voice. 2 officers. Do you know what is the scariest thing? It's not that I was caught and thrown into jail by the police, but that I was targeted by this group of people. Once you are targeted by this group of people, you may be tortured even before you die. After listening to Shou Gou's story, Su Ming and Su Chongqing couldn't help but fell silent. A few seconds later, Su Chongqing frowned and asked quite seriously. Skinny dog. You said this is an organization. But from your description just now, I can't be sure. Is this an organization with many people? And it's really weird that such a large criminal organization could keep it secret for so long. The thin dog put out the cigarette in his hand, shook his head and explained. Officer, I can guarantee that this is definitely a multi-person organization. Because at first I had forgotten about Brother Taisan. It wasn't until a sudden phone call 2 months ago that I realized that I was also being targeted. On the phone, that person asked me to be a second-level drug dealer in the Magic City and act according to the orders from above. With the experience of Brother Taisan, I didn't dare to refuse. So I agreed. The third day, a voice specially modified with a voice changer opened up and asked me to retrieve the 200 grams of high-purity heroin hidden away. The first phone call that ordered me to be Ma Zi did not use a voice changer, but the second phone call that gave me instructions used a voice changer. I think this is definitely not a person, otherwise why use a voice changer? And according to what Brother Taisan told me, that person gave him 10 kilograms to deal with when he made the move. Why did it only come to me, only 200 grams? I think he is definitely not the same person. His style of doing things is completely different. Although I can't compare with you police officers, I don't know how to solve cases and find clues, but I have been in society for so long, and I have long known how to read eyes. No matter how a person changes, he can't suddenly become so timid. As soon as these words came out, Su Ming, who was sitting next to him with his eyes slightly squinted and his hand stroking gently, suddenly thought of some possibility and said slowly. The scale of this organization is probably beyond imagination. At the same time I feel this launch in Magic City may not mean that you are getting timid. Most likely, he just joined this huge drug trafficking organization and has not been allocated much share. He is still in the assessment period. The leader behind this organization is not sure whether this upline has the courage of the members of the organization in Suzhou. Otherwise, in a city as big as Magic City, the number of drug addicts is several times that of Gusu. Even if it is the first time, it is impossible to throw out only 200 grams of high-purity heroin transactions. Because it is still in the probation period. So naturally, they are more cautious and afraid than experienced people, so they choose to use voice changers to cover up their voices. In other words, that organization is just preparing to control the drug market in Magic City. This is the inference. In fact, it is easy to get from 2 places. First of all, Shou Gou is a well-known drug addict in our Magic City. He was targeted and turned into a lackey 2 months ago, which has roughly confirmed this possibility. As for the second one. Speaking of this, Su Ming looked at Su Chongqing beside him and asked seriously. Brother Sheng. In the past 10 years, have you ever found heroin with a purity far exceeding the normal purity in all the jurisdictions of our Magic City? The purity of the first-hand drugs sold by this organization is at least 95%. Within 10 years. No matter how hidden it is possible that it will be found offline. No, absolutely not. Su Changxing shook his head directly and responded to Su Ming's speculation without hesitation. In the past 10 years, drugs with a purity of up to 95% have never been found on those drug dogs. Drugs with such high purity. Basically, you can only see them at customs and airports. Getting this answer, Su Ming nodded thoughtfully, and then suggested seriously. Brother Sheng. I suggest that we put the organization aside for now, start with this falling case to find the murderer, and then follow the clues to dig out all the rotten roots. This is the best choice. Because compared to others, this newly joined newbie is probably the easiest to break through. Su Changxing nodded in agreement, immediately looked at the thin dog sitting in a daze at the interrogation table, patted the table to make him come back to his senses and asked. Thin dog. Now you recall it carefully. During your contact with your superior, is there anything that makes you feel particularly strange and memorable? The thin dog came back to his senses. Now he dared not neglect or hesitate, and regarded Su Ming and Su Changxing as the only possibility to save his daughter, gritted his teeth and recalled hard. After dozens of seconds, the thin dog seemed to suddenly think of something, and suddenly opened his eyes and said. Eye exercises. Yes, it's eye exercises. I once, in the phone call from him, I actually heard the sound of eye exercises. Chapter 56. The key clues to the case emerge. The murderer is an old demon. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Eye exercises. This special clue that skinny dog suddenly remembered. Su Ming and Su Changxing looked at each other in tacit understanding, their eyes sparkling. Google search TWKN. This clue is really crucial, and it may be able to narrow down the scope of the suspect several times. Because the announcement of eye exercises, it is not a special announcement that can be heard everywhere. Only in elementary school, junior high school and high school, the announcement of eye exercises will appear during class breaks. Even colleges don't have eye exercises. After all, college students are basically adults. Skipping classes and surfing the internet are commonplace. And they will not sit in the classroom and do eye exercises obediently. The background sound of eye exercises on. The call undoubtedly locks the scope of the murderer into the school. The first to bear the brunt is undoubtedly Shude Middle School. However, as an old criminal policeman, Su Changxing did not immediately completely lock this clue. He tapped his fingers on the table and continued to ask. Shou Gou. Recall carefully, did you hear the sound of eye exercises when the call was connected, or did it sound accidentally in the middle? Then, is the sound of eye exercises in the background clear in your impression? Or is it similar to the noise of the radio, that it can be seen? Su Changxing is trying to exclude as much as possible whether the eye exercises in the background were deliberately made by the murderer for Shou Gou to hear, or the eye exercises were really recorded accidentally. As for asking whether the sound is clear or not, naturally, it is to judge whether the murderer behind the scenes is trying to come up with false clues to confuse the police. Even if he is not in school, he will download the sound of eye exercises and play it during the call. These two questions made Shou Gou frown and recall carefully for 2 seconds, and then answered quite affirmatively. 2 officers. The sound of eye exercises on the phone was not there at the beginning, but suddenly sounded in the middle. At that time, I was still wondering why there was a sound of eye exercises, but I certainly didn't dare to ask more questions. As a lackey under that group of people, it is absolutely the first condition to save your life not to make trouble or ask random questions. As for whether it was a recording, it's definitely not. Although I was expelled from school after only attending the 2nd year of high school, the noisy telegram sound of the school's garbage broadcast, I will never forget it in my life. I can guarantee that I will never hear it wrong, that it can be seen. The skinny dog's mood has obviously recovered a little, and he is not as close to collapse as before. Hearing this answer, Su Changxing nodded thoughtfully, and did not avoid the skinny dog who would definitely not dare to hide or lie. Looking at Su Ming beside him, he raised his head and gestured. Xiao Ming, what do you think? The clues of this eye exercise have pointed us to a very important direction. The murderer of this case is indeed very likely to be an acquaintance in the school, that after several previous cases, Su Changxing already had a clear understanding of Su Ming's reasoning ability, so he asked at this time, hoped to integrate the most likely situation as soon as possible and lock the mastermind behind this case. Su Ming did not answer immediately, frowning slightly helplessly. Brother Sheng. With just an eye exercise, there is really no way to draw a portrait of the suspect too surely. Because there is a very strange place. The online person mentioned by Shou Gou, that is, the criminal suspect, is definitely very cautious in character from his deliberate use of a voice changer to hide and his criminal method of consciousness control. For such a person, it seems that it is not difficult to remember the time of the eye exercise that is played every day in the school. Why not avoid that time period to reduce the possibility of exposure, but let Shou Gou hear the sound of the eye exercise? Did he do it on purpose? Or did he just forget it suddenly? Based on the current clues and my understanding of the suspect, I don't think I can make an accurate judgment. But what I can roughly determine is, if the murderer is really someone from Shude Middle School, then there is a high probability that he has an independent office. Otherwise, I don't think he would dare to call and contact Shou Gou in an open space such as the grade office or the playground. Of course, the premise is that the murderer is indeed someone from Shude Middle School, otherwise all inferences have to start over. There are still too few clues. Speaking of this, Su Ming looked at Shou Gou, who was full of astonishment, and seemed to be shocked at how the two could judge so many details from an eye exercise, and said seriously. Shou Gou. Continue to recall, when you contact that person again, is there anything special? For example, are there any aspects of the transaction location, transaction details, transaction process, etc. that make you confused and completely confused about its intention? No doubt, based on Su Ming's own experience, whether out of vigilance or to clear suspicion, a vigilant murderer like the mastermind is likely to expose more details during the transaction. Shou Gou saw that the suspect could not be identified. In order to ensure the safety of his daughter, he began to scratch his hair with both hands, carefully recalling the process and details of each transaction. A full minute passed. Seeing that Shou Gou did not speak and was still scratching his hair, Su Changxing frowned and then spoke. No other questions? If you really can't think of it, then tell me how many times you have traded, respectively in. Hasn't finished yet. Shou Gou suddenly raised his head, looked at Su Ming and Su Changxing, and spoke hastily. And I remember. He seems to be very familiar with the Magic City. We have traded 3 times in total, but the trading location he chose each time, I really haven't heard of it. You know, I have lived in the Magic City for more than 10 years, and I am considered a half-local, but I am not familiar with a single trading location. Even the location of the first transaction, I still asked the elderly living nearby to find it, otherwise I really couldn't find the place. These words, Su Ming became interested again, raised his eyebrows and looked at Shou Gou and asked in depth. Since it is so difficult to find the transaction location, then I think what were the locations of the 3 transactions? Shou Gou, you should remember it very clearly, right? Shou Gou nodded immediately, and then said without hesitation. The first transaction was 2 months ago, under the stone bricks at the back door of Fulin's store, with 200 grams of high-purity xiaobai hidden. The second transaction was a month ago, in the iron gate of Xingtian textile factory. At that time, I struggled to climb in and got 300 grams of high-purity xiaobai. As for the third time, it was in the doghouse at the end of Hexing Alley, with a bag of candy in it, which is what you 2 police officers just talked about. The only pity is, every time he traded, he hid the things first, and then asked me to go and get them. I never had the chance to see his specific appearance. Of course, even if I had the opportunity at that time, I would definitely not dare to take a look. After all, the example of Brother Tai-san is right in front of us. As soon as the voice fell, Su Changxing tapped the table lightly, squinting his eyes and telling the story seriously. Old Modu people. Drug dealers who can choose these 3 places to trade must have grown up in Modu and are native locals. Chapter 57 Screening the staff of Shude Middle School, is the mastermind hiding nearby? You are listening at novelfull.audio. A native of Magic City, this is another clue to be taken from the thin dog discourse. Now, Su Chongqing did not deliberately show off. He looked at Su Ming beside him and explained. These are the 3 places that skinny dog just mentioned. It also falls under the jurisdiction of Xingtian village. 30 years ago, around the 1990s, it was a quite prosperous place in Huaihai district. The biggest reason was the huge Xingtian textile factory, which had nearly 10,000 people working there at the time. These workers brought their families with them, making the remote Xingtian village one of the hottest places in Huaihai at that time. Fulin's canteen was the closest canteen to the textile factory. As for Hexing Alley, it is naturally where the vast majority of workers live. But it didn't last long. In the mid-1990s, the slogan of breaking the iron rice bowl came out, and an unprecedented wave of layoffs swept the entire country. That year, due to poor profitability and aging industrial structure, the textile factory was forcibly closed down and the factory brands were directly burned, causing all the workers to scatter and look for other jobs. In less than a year, the excitement and prosperity of Xingtian village disappeared like a bubble, replaced by all kinds of desolation and remoteness. Because Xingtian village is located on the edge of the suburbs. It was originally bustling because of the textile factory, but more and more people moved away later. There are probably not many people in the whole village now. But it can't be demolished. The textile factory is too big, and the place is remote. It's impossible to make money by demolishing and building houses. Real estate developers don't do business at a loss, so they just leave it there. Except for the old motor people, even if others go to Xingtian village, they will definitely not know what this abandoned factory is called, let alone. There are 2 places, Fulin Canteen and Hexing Alley. But it is indeed a good place for drug dealing. After all, it is almost completely abandoned, and there are not many surveillance eyes at all. Speaking of which, Su Chongqing seemed to be afraid that Su Ming would misunderstand, so he quickly added another sentence. Xiao Ming, don't get me wrong. I'm not that old. This was something that the Forest Bureau told me casually when they took me to handle a case that happened in Xingtian village. After all, when the Xingtian textile factory was abandoned, the Forest Bureau was already in elementary school. A skinny dog sitting in an interrogation chair, after hearing what Su Chongqing said, he quickly picked up the topic. Yes. When I first went to this place, I felt it was extremely desolate. There weren't many young people there. It was basically old people who were half buried. Half locals like us really don't know this place. Right. 2 officers, I also thought of a weird thing. Speaking of which, the thin dog paused for 2 seconds, and when he saw Su Ming and Su Chongqing looking at him again, he continued seriously and firmly. My online one seems to be suffering from some illness. Because while on the phone, I often hear him sneeze suddenly. The sound is not particularly loud. It's a bit like he is trying to hold it in. And there was the sound of sniffling. I can't remember exactly. There must have been sneezing anyway. This detail was told by Shou Gou. Su Ming raised his eyebrows curiously and continued to ask following the clues. When I called you 3 times. Do you always sneeze? Or just once or twice? The thin dog rolled his eyes and thought seriously for 2 seconds. Then he answered vaguely and could not remember clearly. Can't remember clearly. It seems like the first time I called, I didn't sneeze. Then, it seems like there was a second time. But the last time, almost 15 days ago, I definitely sneezed, and I sneezed several times. Hear this answer, Su Ming nodded slightly, then looked at Su Chongqing beside him. Brother Sheng. I'll take a wild guess. This potential suspect is likely to have rhinitis caused by pollen allergy, because in the impression of a thin dog. The first time we contacted him, he didn't call. The second time he seemed to be sneezing, and the third time he was definitely suppressing a sneeze. If it was just a cold, I don't think it would last this long. Not to mention, a minor illness like a cold won't take long to get better. Instead of becoming a clue, it can become false information to confuse our police. Of course, there's no need to hold back a sneeze because you don't want the skinny dog to notice it. As for serious diseases such as tuberculosis or lung cancer, it is even more impossible. After all, that extremely strict drug trafficking organization. You won't find a patient to control a drug market as big as the Magic City. Then, if we make an inference based on time, when that person first contacted Shou Gou, it should have been February. At that time, the weather was still relatively cold and the powders from various flowers, plants and trees had not yet begun to disperse, so it did not cause his pollen allergy. When I contacted Shou Gou for the second time, it was already March. Spring had come. Although various pollens were scattered in the air, they were not particularly abundant. So it should be tolerable. If I coughed once or twice from time to time, Shou Gou would not remember it deliberately. And 15 days ago, the pollen in the air reached its peak. The suspect could not bear it at all, but he was afraid of sneezing and exposing his identity, so he had to hold it in. After all, the pollen in the air will not end until May, and in his blue whale game, Zhang Wan and Huang Yan will not live that long. Then naturally they need to hide as much as possible to avoid being discovered by us. Although there are still many clues missing, I can roughly draw a portrait of the suspect. At this moment, Su Ming rubbed his chin with one hand and tapped the table with the other hand. He sorted out his thoughts and continued seriously. The clues from the interrogation of Shou Gou are the main ones. The real murderer behind the scenes can be identified. He is cautious and careful. Due to the use of a voice changer, his gender is temporarily unknown. He is temporarily identified as a school employee in Shude Middle School, and at least has a unilateral understanding of the profiles of Huang Yan and Zhang Wan. It is likely that he has an independent office, but it is not 100% certain. He grew up in the Magic City and may have witnessed the rise and fall of Xingtian textile factory. Here I will add some personal inferences. In my previous experience, drug dealers usually choose places they are familiar with rather than completely unfamiliar places when choosing a transaction location. But because Xingtian village has long been in decline, so the parents of this criminal suspect may have worked in Xingtian textile factory. So the suspect is so familiar with Xingtian village. At the same time, the suspect is very likely to suffer from pollen allergies, which will cause uncontrollable sneezing and coughing. The last point. From the blue whale game played by Huang Yan and Zhang Wan, I judged that the suspect is likely to have a certain foundation as a psychological counselor or psychiatrist. Because in the last email that Huang Yan communicated with the suspect, he deliberately mentioned the mental hospital. Although it may be false information, it can be temporarily put in for screening. And from the progress of consciousness control crime, it can be seen that the suspect has the foundation of such ability, but it is not ruled out that he specially learned it by himself in the later period, just for the crime to happen. Su Ming temporarily stopped talking, looked at Su Changsheng and suggested, "Brother Sheng, I think we can start screening at Shude Middle School based on this clue. Because no matter where the suspect is, this clue alone can tell us the general situation of Huang Yan and Zhang Wan. It's enough for us to start screening from inside Shude Middle School. And I believe, whether we find the murderer or not, screening inside Shude Middle School will only bring us one step closer to the truth." Chapter 58, Retrieving Files Across Provinces, There Must Be Connections Between the Cases. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Many homicide cases. In fact, it is difficult to directly identify the suspect, because the murderer will now consciously avoid the surveillance eye. Basically, useful clues are extracted from the corpse of the deceased, the crime scene, the interrogation of relevant personnel, etc., and then a range is defined for screening, after identifying possible suspects. Writing this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network. Detailed comparisons and Interrogations will then be conducted to determine the final murderer. This alternative method of elimination, it is currently used quite frequently in criminal investigation and solving cases. Now, after listening to Su Ming's analysis and the selected characteristics of the murderer, Su Changxing nodded in agreement. We really can't waste any more time. Although no decisive clues have been found yet, many detailed speculations can indeed support the first screening. It will be beneficial to the follow-up work to eliminate the suspicion of school employees of Shude Middle School as soon as possible, or to identify possible criminal suspects. Okay, I'll ask the technical department to check the employees of Shude Middle School later. We must find possible suspects. Speaking of which, Su Changxing looked at the thin dog opposite, tapped the table and asked slowly. Skinny dog. Although you have explained a lot, I suddenly thought of a question. You said it before. This criminal organization occupies at least 50% of the drug sales chain in Dragon Kingdom, but you haven't even seen it online. How did you come to this conclusion? Besides, isn't it really strange that such a large drug trafficking organization could hide it for so long? That the thin dog sitting on the interrogation chair showed a somewhat frightened look in his eyes and said with certainty. Officer, 50% is my guess. But I think, if you dig deeper, the specific shares and trading chain found may be even more shocking than what I said. As for where you want to ask me where I got the information, I can only say that although we are not as good as the police, we poisonous gangsters also have our own sources of information. When I was targeted again, I also thought about running away to get rid of them, but the first thing was to determine how big their organization was. So the next day, I immediately found various connections and asked my poisonous friends in the surrounding cities if there was any way to buy xiaobai with a purity of over 95. Half of my friends answered me, yes. Except for that organization, I think no one would be willing to buy such a pure product. As for why I was able to hide it for so long, maybe it's because I didn't dare to tell anyone. Or maybe the person has been dealt with in advance before any explanation. Su Changxing nodded thoughtfully, then packed up the interrogation materials, stood up slowly and said. Okay, let's stop the trial this time. During this period, Shou Gou, please stay at the police station. You don't have to go back to the detention center for the time being. If anything else happens later, we will come to you as soon as possible. Immediately afterwards, Su Changxing stood up, and Su Ming also stood, ready to end the interrogation and start the next step. Just when the two opened the door and were about to walk out of the interrogation room, the thin dog suddenly remembered something, quickly turned his head to look at Su Changxing, and pulled the interrogation chair hard. Officer, officer. My daughter, they will definitely. Before the thin dog could finish speaking, Su Changxing turned his head and interrupted his subsequent words without hesitation, speaking quite seriously. Rest assured. Now that we know about this situation, we will naturally ensure the safety of your family to the maximum extent. I'll arrange for a few people in plain clothes to go over later and hide nearby to guard any possible suspects. You don't have to worry about this kind of thing. The only thing you have to do now is to continue to think carefully about whether there are any other key clues and questions. After saying that, Su Changxing closed the interrogation room door. Su Ming, who was walking next to him, thought carefully for a few seconds, then looked at Su Changxing beside him and asked. Brother Sheng. I'd like to check across the city. There are files on the triathlon case. I hope I can find some useful clues. Since the murderer of this falling case is from the same organization as the person who threatened the triathlete according to Skinny Go, then maybe the two of them have something in common. Even if not, at least we can try to dig out such a large criminal organization. Regarding Su Ming's proposal, naturally, Su Changxing would not object. After all, Su Ming had discovered extremely useful clues from the files from 20 years ago. Then he waved his hand and informed. Okay, no problem. But now that we can't afford to waste time, we shouldn't go through the cumbersome procedures of transferring files across cities and provinces. Go directly to the Forest Bureau office and ask him to help fight for the privilege of making a call first and completing the formalities later. Just in time to tell you about the discovery of this large drug trafficking organization. The things dug out of this case really make my scalp numb. After saying that, Su Changxing walked towards the direction of the Criminal Investigation Technology Department, and wanted to use the citizen database established by the police over the years to screen and lock in possible criminal suspects in Shude Middle School. Su Ming came to the door of the director's office. Knock knock knock. He stretched out his hand and knocked gently a few times. Come in, the door is not locked. Lin Tian's slightly hoarse voice sounded. Su Ming then turned the handle and pushed the door into the director's office. As soon as he entered, he smelled a strong smell of cigarettes, and the whole office was shrouded in a thin layer of smoke. Looking towards the position of the desk, I found that Lin Tian's right elbow was against the table, his forearm was suspended, and there was a nearly burned cigarette between his index and middle fingers, just from the half-ash that had not broken. Lin Tian probably hadn't taken a puff for several minutes, and in the ashtray next to it, there were at least 2 packs of cigarette butts, but most of them had not turned yellow due to the use of cigarettes. It was obvious. Lin Tian simply lit it, and held it. Su Ming walked forward slowly and found that Lin Tian's left palm was holding the file of the 5.13 Demon City University dismemberment case. It must be Su Changxing's previous words. I deduced from this file a clue that had not been discovered for nearly 20 years. That's why Lin Tian was so concerned, hoping to go further and find the murderer of this major case. When Su Ming approached, Lin Tian also put out the cigarette but in his hand, pushed the file of the 5.13 dismemberment case aside, looked at Su Ming in front of him and smiled. What's wrong, Xiao Ming? Is there any problem with the falling case? Tell me what happened. Su Ming sorted out his thoughts and was about to speak. Ding-ling-ling ding-ling. The phone on the desk rang. Lin Tian glanced at the caller ID, then raised his palm to signal Su Ming to wait, and answered the phone impatiently. Hello, Principal Chu. The case is still being processed. You are calling again this time to pause for a few seconds, as if waiting for the other party to finish speaking. Lin Tian continued to respond. Don't worry, Principal Chu. We may give a result as soon as possible, and of course we understand the difficulties of your school. For cases involving minors, the pressure of public opinion from the media and netizens must be great. But there is no way. We, the police, can't just make up a reason to deal with those people, right? No matter how big the impact of the case is, we have to get things clear, right? Okay, that's it for now. Don't call anymore. I'll contact you when there is concrete progress in the case. Hang up. Chapter 59. Lin Tian was getting a little impatient and focused on investigating the principal of Shu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Simply deal with the principal of Shude Middle School. Writing this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network. Lin Tian hung up the phone without hesitation, threw the phone casually on the table, looked at Su Ming and raised his head to signal. Xiao Ming. Are there any other issues with this case? If it's just a simple case of suicide and falling from a building, I'm afraid it won't take Xiao Su and you so long. Su Ming nodded slightly and said solemnly. Forest Bureau. This case of falling from a building has a lot of implications. It is not just a case of a junior high school girl committing suicide due to depression. Rather, someone is using a suicide game to guide 2 victims to have suicidal thoughts in a short period of time and put them into action. But this is only what appears on the surface. The most amazing thing is, through the interrogation of one of the victims, it was discovered that a drug dealer arrested a few days ago was related to this case, and after an in-depth interrogation of him, uncovered an extremely shocking news. There is a huge criminal organization that controls 50% of the drug sales network in our Dragon Kingdom. And the real murderer of this falling case is a member of this huge criminal organization. These words, Lin Tian's pupils suddenly shrank, but he quickly regained his composure, knocked on the table and said seriously. Xiao Ming. Tell me the ins and outs of this case in detail. 50% of the drug sales network. This case is too big. We must find out the truth as soon as possible. Lin Tian was shocked. Su Ming did not feel any surprise. Or rather, but all the public officials in the Longhua Public Security Organization structure heard that there was such a large drug trafficking organization hidden for many years without being discovered. Your scalp will definitely feel numb, and you will subconsciously think that this is impossible, because the Dragon Kingdom's anti-drug efforts are well known to the world, but they never imagined that such a large organization could exist. Then there was no hesitation. Su Ming immediately told the ins and outs of the case of falling from a building, as well as the cases within the case that were derived from it. A full 5 minutes passed. Su Ming finally told Lin Tian clearly what happened, as well as various inferred details and processes. Now, after listening to Su Ming's words, Lin Tian took out a cigarette from the cigarette case on the table, held it between his fingers and lit it, but did not take a single puff, letting it burn slowly on his fingertips. There was silence for dozens of seconds. After the floating smoke covered his face, Lin Tiankai was deeply shocked and spoke in a rather hoarse voice. So, Xiao Ming. This seemingly simple case of a junior high school girl falling from a building is actually far more complicated than imagined. Not only does there exist special criminal methods such as consciousness control, but the most important thing is that one has been hidden for an unknown amount of time, and we have only been able to dig out a few clues by chance. It is a giant drug trafficking organization that owns guns, can smuggle high-purity drugs, and dares to directly threaten to kill. He exhaled a heavy breath. Lin Tian blew away the smoke in front of him, revealed his extremely determined eyes, clenched his left fist and said coldly. Although the current case of falling from a building is more difficult to detect several times, fortunately, I accidentally discovered that our Dragon Kingdom actually hides such a large drug trafficking organization. If we let them hide for a few more years, there's no telling what kind of horrific harm they will cause. Just by digging out this organization, I can give both you and Xiao Su a great achievement. Speaking of which, Lin Tian paused for 2 seconds, looked at Su Ming in front of him, and asked seriously. Xiao Ming. This case is roughly handled by you. Since Xiao Su allows you to come to me, it is enough to show his trust in you. Now you have the guts to say it. What are your views and means of entry into this case that is currently at a deadlock, and do you need any special help? It's obvious, currently, Lin Tian is also very optimistic about Su Ming. After all, whether it is this case or the previous files from 20 years ago, he found clues to the 5.13 corpse case. This was enough to prove that Su Ming's ability and the perfect score that had never appeared in the exam were not just some random luck. Due to the urgency of the case, Su Ming was not polite and told him all his inner thoughts. Forest Bureau. First of all, I think the most correct choice is to put that large drug trafficking organization aside and deal with this falling case first. Because over the years, at least from the time I ate peanuts in the triathlon to now, in the past 3 years, police forces across the country have not reported any news about this organization. This speaks volumes about the covert nature of this organization and its unprecedented rigor. There are no clues at all at the moment, and I don't even know where to look for clues. It's extremely difficult to start the investigation from here. The best way is obviously first find out the murderer of the falling case, and use this murderer to dig out this huge drug trafficking organization. Although our current clues in the falling case are also very messy, at least there is a place to start. At the same time, since the murderer of the falling case belongs to the same organization as the murderer of the Gusu Taishan case, I hope you can give me the authority to retrieve files across provinces and cities. If we can dig out relevant clues from these 2 cases, it will definitely be of great help in finding the murderer behind the scenes. Su Ming clarified the thoughts in his mind and determined that he only needed the authority to retrieve the files for the time being before continuing. Nothing else. Forest Bureau, let's give you the authority to retrieve files across provinces and cities for the time being. Lin Tian put out the nearly burning cigarette and nodded without hesitation. Okay. I'm going to call Director Shin of our Demon City Public Security Bureau right now and arrange a privileged internal account as soon as possible, which will allow you to access all the files across provinces. At the same time, I also want to report the matter of that huge drug trafficking organization. Then let's do this first. Xiao Ming, just go and do your work first. I will send you a special account later. Make sure to find the murderer as soon as possible. After saying that, Lin Tian picked up his desktop phone and was about to call the Shinhall phone number he just mentioned. There was a sudden pause, as if he had thought of something. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Su Ming, squinting his eyes and giving a hint. Xiao Ming. You will help me check out the principal of Shude Middle School later, Chu Wenbiao. Especially if his relatives and friends have any possibility or opportunity to use him to commit crimes. It's just 3 or 4 hours. He just made several phone calls, urging me to find out the truth. There must be something wrong with him. The real murderer may not be like this, but if you are eager to know if you have any accomplices who have been dug out, then maybe it is possible. Chapter 60, Searching for the Murderer's Motive. The case has reached a critical point. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Walk out of Lin Tian's office. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. Su Ming exhaled a heavy breath, took out the mobile phone in his pocket, and sent a message to Su Changxing. The content is, let Su Changxing investigate Chu Wenbiao more and see if there is anything dirty behind his back. Just as Lin Tian said, no matter how much pressure the media puts on him, as the principal of Shude Middle School, he shouldn't be so anxious. Moreover, after being a principal for so many years, it is impossible for him not to be able to speak a few words or simply deal with the media. So many phone calls were made, urging the police to come up with the truth, and it always feels like it's suggesting suicide, actually. Look at it from Su Ming's perspective. In the current case of falling from a building, it can be roughly seen that the murderer behind the scenes is very cautious, so there shouldn't be a situation where you are so nervous that you can't hold it in any longer and keep calling to inquire. But no matter from which angle you look at it, Chu Wenbiao is obviously a little abnormal. Even if he is not the murderer behind the case, there is a high probability that it is related to this case, or there is something shameful about it. Return to the conference room where the case is being handled. Su Ming walked slowly in front of the clue whiteboard where various photos could be posted or important case information could be written. Pick up a grease pen. I carefully wrote 2 words on the whiteboard: motivation. Yes, that's the motive. This middle school falling case codenamed Blue Whale Game has so far, I haven't found an obvious motive yet. Because, the murderer behind the scenes deliberately provided drugs of such high purity and wasted a lot of time communicating through emails to force their minds to control Zhang Wan and Huang Yan, this can no longer be a random crime without any purpose. At the same time, and because the remaining students in the school have not received the email application from Blue Whale Games, the murderer was accurately targeted at Huang Yan and Zhang Wan, who were psychologically fragile and complex due to various emergencies and family factors. So it can be proven, Huang Yan and Zhang Wan were definitely the prey carefully selected by the murderer. And there was a place where they could learn about their current situation, but the problem still exists. But what's the motive? Why did the murderer murder Huang Yan and Zhang Wan? And according to the news from Skinny Dog, this murderer was most likely absorbed into the giant drug trafficking organization 2 months ago. Judging from the amount of drugs that have been provided to Shou Gou in the past few times, it is very likely that he has not yet gained the complete trust of the drug trafficking organization. You haven't even gained a foothold yet, and you're trying to kill someone. What is this for? Are you really not worried? You finally joined that organization, but were arrested by the police not long after. Could it be that Huang Yan and Zhang Wan accidentally discovered or heard direct evidence that the murderer was involved in drug trafficking? That's why the biggest drug lord in the magical city had to take the risk to get rid of the 2 of them. Think seriously for a few minutes. Su Ming couldn't help but pinched his brows with a headache, but still couldn't come to a suitable conclusion. After all, it is really difficult to have any connection between the biggest drug kingpin in Shanghai and 2 underage students in junior high school. There are also crucial clues missing. We can only hope, from the case of Taisan in Suzhou City, we can find some useful clues based on the characteristics of the murderers belonging to the same drug trafficking organization. At this time, Su Ming's cell phone placed on the table sounded a new message notification. Open it and take a look. I found out that it was Lin Tian who sent the privileged account. And not only can you check the files of Suzhou City, but you can even check the files of other provinces and cities across the country. It's obvious, the big leaders above also pay unprecedented attention to this huge drug trafficking organization that was discovered. There was no hesitation, Su Ming immediately logged into the police's internal platform and retrieved the relevant files on Tai San's arrest. This dossier does not have many pages, as Su Ming had guessed. A full 10 kilograms of high-purity heroin had been seized, and a lot of poisonous dogs should have been dug up. I guess, Triathlon's bones are hard enough. Even if he wants to receive peanuts, he still doesn't explain everything. He doesn't even explain how many of his customers he has. It's much tougher than a skinny dog. According to dossier records, Tai San was directly caught by the Suzhou police during a transaction, without even a chance to escape. Then, the police searched Tai San's residence and found 10 kilograms of high-purity white wine in wine jars. This is the most high-purity heroin seized by the Suzhou police in a single search. I saw this sentence recorded in the file. Su Ming raised his eyebrows thoughtfully, and then murmured softly to himself. Single shot. Maximum. High-purity heroin. Does that mean? Before Tai San was arrested, high-purity drugs had already been searched. Or so. Isn't Tai San the first Mazi that this drug trafficking organization has found in Suzhou? After all, in Shou Gou's description, the amount that the organization member gave to Tai San for the first time was a full 10 kilograms. Thinking of this, Su Ming immediately searched and searched. 4 years ago, that is, the year before the Tai San case happened, which happened in May of this year. For the first time, the Suzhou police found 5 grams of high-purity heroin without any impurities from a drug dog. In the next 2 months, from time to time, a small amount of high-purity drugs could be confiscated, but the source of supply was not found. Then, in the 3rd month, Suzhou police suddenly found 500 grams of high-purity heroin from a wooden boat by the lake. Due to the large amount of drugs, it immediately attracted the attention of Suzhou police, and began to use various means to conduct strict investigation. Finally, in the 8th month, the suspect who sold high-purity drugs in Suzhou was arrested, but this person was not the source at all, let alone a member of the drug dealer organization. Because Su Ming glanced at the drug dealer in the file and found that he had a 5-year history of drug abuse. From what Tai San said to Shou Gou, that organization would never recruit drug addicts, and the screening of personnel was extremely strict. So, because the first henchman died, Tai San was found later, and he was given 10 kilograms of high-purity heroin for the first time. Thinking of this, Su Ming suddenly frowned, and suddenly felt a little strange. Why, in the 3rd month, there were more high-purity drugs in Gusu City. Is this the member of the organization in charge of Gusu City, who gained the trust of other drug dealers through the probation period? Or, completed some special assessment? Could this member of the organization in Moda be still in the probation period? What assessment failed to complete? Su Ming was immediately full of questions and began to read all the files in Gusu City during that period. Based on past experience, if the suspect is not arrested in time, it is likely that he will commit crimes again in a short period of time. And Jing waited until the storm had passed and returned to the original crime scene. He carefully browsed through the files of Gusu City. He hoped to find out what exactly caused the members of the organization in Gusu City to increase the supply of drugs. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Several minutes passed. When Su Ming was about to give up this line, a murder case that occurred in Gusu City 3.5 years ago suddenly caught his eye. The title of this murder case was Private Cinema Potassium Cyanide Murder Case. The most important thing is, there is a very conspicuous sign under this case, unclosed case.